Comrades and friends, this unprecedented global capitalist economic crisis is devastating the lives of workers not only in the poor developing countries, but also in the rich capitalist countries, including in the belly of the beast, right here in the U.S. Almost daily, there is some study released on how workers are being impacted by unemployment, underemployment, home foreclosures, debt, lack of education and health care, attacks on pensions, and the list goes on and on. Just reading all of these statistics can easily be a downer and a source of tremendous demoralization and desperation, especially for the masses that right now see no way out of this morass. But for the movement, it should have the opposite effect. Because as Marxists, our duty and responsibility is not just to interpret and analyze the world's problems, but to change them. Revolutionaries must play a decisive part of the solution, not part of the problem. These experts from bourgeois academia have endless sources for these studies at their disposal, but they never view these deteriorating conditions within the general framework of the decadent, archaic nature of the capitalist system, which is driven insanely to make profits at the expense of human needs. These findings, however, do serve a useful purpose to reinforce a perspective that our party has maintained since our founding in 1959. And that is the working class here, like in other countries, is not homogeneous. That within the exploited working class, there exist all forms of inequality, like racism. On the one hand, the theft of surplus value, that is the fact that workers' labor is being exploited by the bosses and stolen, continues to be a tremendous source of profits for the corporate bosses. This exploitation has laid the basis for globalized solidarity as the trend of growing poverty in the capitalist countries is moving steadily in the same direction downward as the poverty in the oppressed countries. But because oppressed nations or people of color exist inside imperialist countries based on centuries-old super-exploitation and the white supremacist attitudes that flow from it, there is a greater degree of suffering in disproportionate numbers among people of color that cannot be ignored. There has been a lot written about the plight of African Americans in the current economic crisis. I just want to raise just a few of these devastating numbers. The richest 1% of the U.S. population owns close to 40% of the wealth. The top 25% of U.S. households own 87%. Given this general widening gap between rich and poor here, a recent Brandeis University study shows that a white family has 5 times more wealth than a black family, amounting to a difference of about $95,000. Black workers have historically been on the lower rung of getting better paying jobs since millions migrated to the North following World War II to escape semi-slave Ku Klux Klan terrorist conditions in the South. Millions of black workers had to fight their way into northern unions to fight against the racist attitudes of the white union leadership to do this. And this racist legacy put black workers into the position of being the first fired in the midst of the restructuring period of the capitalist economic system, economy in the mid-1980s that led to the closings of the auto and steel plants in the Midwest especially, and outsourcing to other countries. In a recent CNN documentary called, quote, Almighty Debt, Black in America, which examines some aspects of the economic crisis on black people, It was stated that 81% of black college graduates have outstanding loans. 1 out of 10 black families is losing their homes to foreclosure, due mainly to the predatory subprime loans which singled out black mothers, single mothers, along with Latino single mothers. According to Graduate Employment Gap, Students of Color Losing Ground report, the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-old African American high school students increased by 11 points since the beginning of the recession in 2007. And this number has increased to 31.3%. The unemployment rate for white high school students at 21.4% is the lowest amongst black, Latino, and Asian graduates. African American college graduates have an unemployment rate of 15.4%, up from 8.4% since the beginning of the recession. Almost twice as many black workers are unemployed compared to whites. And of course we know this crisis is much deeper, especially in the oppressed communities, and especially among youth of color. This current crisis for black people is rooted in the legacy of slavery, the counter-revolution known as the demise of Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and the current institutionalized racist situation today. This economic crisis has caused a political crisis as well, especially since the 2008 election of President Obama. Millions of people, especially people of color and young people, were hoping that the election of the first African American president would be the answer to good-paying jobs, the eradication of racism, and the end of endless war. But just the opposite has happened, as the recent election helped to reflect. That is, the economic assaults have intensified, and so has racism and other forms of reaction in the form of the Tea Party, increased police brutality, and much more. President Obama, like every president before him, whether Democrat or Republican, serves the interests of the bourgeoisie, since the U.S. president is nothing more than the head administrator of the capitalist state in order to maintain class rule, that is, bourgeois class rule. In this almighty debt special, the intervention of the black churches was raised as a viable solution to help congregation members facing foreclosures and layoffs. And our party would certainly support any source of immediate economic relief for our class. But this kind of relief is like a bandage trying to cover a growing cancer. It's not the ultimate solution. Since this economic crisis is global in nature, the response has to be global as well. And that is a global rebellion against all forms of capitalism and imperialism. The pre-conference documents clearly show that no matter how many trillions of dollars the government hands over to the banks in bailouts, the present capitalist crisis will remain permanent. And to take it one step further, capitalism cannot be reformed. The capitalists are appendages to an irrational system, not the other way around. Capitalism must be uprooted tooth and nail. The only proven way to get rid of capitalism and all of the repressive institutions that it needs to keep it alive, like national oppression, women's oppression, lesbian, gay, bi, and trans oppression, is a socialist revolution. All revolutionaries must put aside all ideological differences to unite, to build a united front for socialism, a system that puts people's needs before profits. The material conditions are more than right to do this. What is missing, more than anything else, is the political will to do this. This kind of unity is crucial to reaching our class sisters and brothers in an effective way with a political program of fight back and struggle. Comrades and friends, sisters and brothers, solidarity is key to building class unity, especially with the most oppressed workers who are taking the bold actions, like the immigrant-led sit-in by Republic Doors and Windows workers in 2008, which won back wages for them. There's Black Workers for Justice in UE 150, organizing public sector workers in the low-wage, racist state of North Carolina. There's the Black-led IOWU Local 10 that recently shut down the docks on the West Coast to protect the police killings of the Black youth Oxford Lake. And then there's the Black-led Million Worker March movement, which declared in 2004 that workers should speak in their own name and not depend on the Democratic Party for any type of help or assistance or guidance. Our party has important relations with all of these heroic workers and many more that you will be hearing about this weekend. If you want to not only fight against all forms of economic and political inequality, but if you want to fight against the entire system that fosters these inequalities, then you have come to the right place. Help us to abolish the dying system of capitalism. Help us to build a socialist future. Help us to build Workers' World Party. Thank you.